Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I've got a really interesting guest to introduce you to tonight. Dr. Ruby Dhalla has announced her candidacy for the leadership of the Liberal Party. Ruby Dhalla, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Brian, and it's a pleasure to be on.
So tell me, why are you running to be the leader of the Liberal Party, Prime Minister of Canada? You've been out of politics for a while. Why are you coming back?
I'm coming back because the Liberal Party needs to beat Pierre Poilievre. We need to beat the Conservatives. And I believe with my experience in business, in healthcare, and also as a three-time elected member of Parliament, I have the skills, I have the experience, the passion, and the fire to go out and for our party to beat the Conservatives.
So you've been out of politics for a while. What have you been doing?
Well, I was elected, as you know, first in 2004, and I had the humble honor of being one of the first women of Indian origin elected, not only in Canada, but the entire Western world. After I left politics, I went into the private sector, and it's been such a fantastic, experience to gain that perspective. While I was in the private sector, I focused on healthcare, on our hotel and hospitality business. And a few months back, I actually just won a Women Hotelier of the Year. So it's been very productive. It's been a lot of hard work. And Brian, you were mentioning of what is one of the reasons that I want to jump back, into politics, but also get back into this particular race as leader of the Liberal Party and Canada's next Prime Minister. I think having business experience is incredibly important. When you are an entrepreneur, when you're operating in the world of business, you learn a lot about the challenges and the struggles that business owners and entrepreneurs are facing, whether it's on, being able to create jobs or overtaxation or the amount of energy and effort required to ensure sustainability and progress. And for us as businesses to be able to compete, not only here in Canada, but also globally, it gives you great insight. And I hope to utilize my experience in the private sector, in business, to ensure that we have more efficiency, that we have more productivity, and we get better results in our government and our party.
Many commentators have suggested that the Liberal Party in the last couple of years has not been very business oriented, not very economically oriented, have been redistributive focused rather than necessarily interested in creating new economic opportunities and economic growth. Is that something that you would intend to change?
I would actually agree with many of the people across the country that we haven't provided opportunities, for businesses in our country to succeed. We haven't provided, opportunities for businesses in Canada to be able to compete. And we haven't provided opportunities, for people in Canada to want to even get into business because they are so overtaxed. And being a business, owner, being a self-made businesswoman at that, I am committed to ensuring that entrepreneurs in our country, business owners, both small and medium size, have the tools, have the skills, and have the resources that they need to not only be able to succeed, but also to be able to compete. And I think when it comes to the issues of job creation, jobs can only be created by entrepreneurs, by businesses, if businesses and those entrepreneurs are doing well. And when we take a look all across Canada, we have more trade restrictions within the provinces, that doesn't even allow a business to flourish in Canada. We need to step up our game, but we need to have a leader. We need to have a prime minister who is not a lifelong politician. I was in politics. I left politics. I'm coming back with that experience. And unless we get someone at the helm who has business experience, we are not going to change the course of our country.
So today is the last day to register to become a Liberal supporter member and vote on the leadership campaign. How are you going to win this campaign? You've got some pretty hefty competition.
Yes, I'm going to win this campaign because when it comes to reaching out, to Liberal members, I want to bring the party back to the membership across this country. We have a number of candidates that are running in this leadership. Each of those candidates have a connection or an affiliation to Trudeau. it's ironic because they are the ones that broke the system and now they want to get back in to fix the system. The only candidate out of all of the other 6 candidates, that is running, that is not affiliated to Trudeau, affiliated to the current administration, or affiliated or involved in creating the many policies, that have caused the situation or the crisis and the chaos that we have in our country. That's myself. And that is why we are reaching out to Canadians all across, engaging new Canadians, engaging business owners, engaging young people, and just engaging people who want to give our country get back on track, help our country get back on track, and also ensure that we as Canadians have the opportunity and ability to compete.
We're chatting tonight with Dr. Ruby Dhalla, who has announced her candidacy for the Liberal leadership and Prime Minister of Canada. Pretty exciting. We're going to take a break for some messages and be back in 2 minutes. I'm going to ask Ruby a little bit about her background to remind us all what she's done in politics. I'm going to ask her a little bit more about her business experience and how that she thinks differentiates herself from other candidates for the Liberal Party and from Pierre Poilievre. And I'm going to ask her about some of the policies and what her strategies are. Stay with us, everyone. This will be an interesting topic tonight. Stay with us. We'll be back in 2 minutes with Dr. Ruby Dhalla. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Dr. Ruby Dhalla is my guest tonight. She has announced that she's a candidate for the leadership of the Liberal Party federally. That's got a leadership convention coming up in less than a month. And also, she'll be Prime Minister of Canada if she's successful. Pretty exciting. And then probably right after that, launch into an election campaign against Pierre Poilievre and Jagmeet Singh, etc. Dr. Dhalla, remind us of your political involvement. You were a 3-time elected MP, is that correct?
Yes, so I was actually involved with the party starting at the age of 14. I have worked on hundreds of campaigns, knocked on thousands of doors. And then in 2004, I was running for the first time for the Liberal Party as a member of Parliament in Brampton, Springdale. And my first election, result, which was June the 28th, 2004, I had the honor, as I shared before, of being one of the first women of Indian origin being elected, not only in Canada, but the entire Western world. I ran for 4 elections. We won 3 of them. And, during that time in Parliament, we had a lot of firsts. There wasn't a lot of women involved. There wasn't a lot of young people involved. And there certainly was not a lot of, diaspora from different immigrant and ethnic communities involved. And when I was first elected, we had a chance to advance issues, that were really important to Canadians. I actually grew up in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Brian, from very, very humble beginnings. And the one quality, if you would want to say, and the one passion and the one force that continues to drive me is my ability to connect with average Canadians. And I realize many of the struggles and the challenges that they face, whether it comes to housing or increased food prices, or even when you talk about issues, of increased crime or increased cell phone bills. I know of those challenges and struggles because, myself and my family, we've lived them. But at the same time, we've had this embodiment, of the Canadian dream where if you work hard and you're driven and you're determined, that anything in life in Canada, it's possible. And so my whole journey has sort of been full circle at that. And I really hope the opportunities that, I had, we will be able to provide to other young people and other people that are struggling to be heard in this country. So I think it's important to have someone, who is in politics and has the ability to connect with people, has a passion, within them, but most importantly is not doing it for a job. I'm not running for the leadership of this country, whether it's as a leader of the Liberal Party or as Prime Minister, because I need a job. I'm leaving a very successful, career, a very successful background, because I think that it is incredibly important that we have someone who has business experience, who has the skills and the business acumen to be able to negotiate deals for Canadians and for our country, not only within Canada, but also on an international stage.
Well, tell us a little bit about your business. I understand you've got a large chain of hotels. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we have, I don't know about the word large, but we have hotels, within North America. And as my brother was the one that was managing it, we had a very big tragedy with the passing away of my brother. I then took over the family responsibility for the business. As I shared with you, I just won Woman Hotelier, of the year.
Congratulations. That's great.
Thank you. It's, I think, more of a testament, to the drive and again the determination. A lot of hard work. I'm the president of the Workaholics Club. Just learning all of the nuances associated within the hotel industry. But I think it's the same, when it comes, the same analogy can be used when we're running government. We need to ensure that we have efficiency within the system. Unless we start operating with efficiency, unless we start making a focus on productivity, we as a country are not going to be able to compete at our optimum. We need to start ensuring that all entrepreneurs and business owners and even young people that have ideas of what they want to achieve, that we give them those tools and those resources. And that's why, Brian, it's so important for someone, to be our prime minister who is not a lifelong career politician. I'm going in to fix the system that has been broken for the last 10 years. I'm going in to shake up the system, and I'm going to be going in to burst that Ottawa bubble. We need to start ensuring that the voices of Canadians across this country are heard. And we need to ensure that we come up with a plan. We have priorities that are reflective of what our communities and our country actually needs.
So, it's been a criticism, as we talked about earlier, of the Liberal Party recently that it hasn't been necessarily focused on business. It hasn't had a growth agenda. There's a former Minister of Finance that is no longer in the government that actually wrote a book about how we don't have a growth agenda. We haven't been focused on productivity and prosperity. How will you change that? What exact policies, other than your experience in businesses, what policies will be backing such that you think that you'll be beneficial for economic development and growth?
I find it interesting, that people are writing books about growth and prosperity, and then when they've had 10 years to do the job, we instead of Canada doing better, we're not doing well internationally. Instead of being a country that was respected and revered, you go out and people kind of shake their heads. Oh, you're from Canada? That was never the response 10 years ago. People used to respect and revere our country, and I want to bring that respect back. Going towards your question is, what is your plan? I think that we need a complete reevaluation of our entire tax regime in this country for business owners and for Canadians. We need to have a concept called value for tax. And having that value for tax will allow us to ensure that every tax that any Canadian, whether they are, an average working Canadian or whether one is a business owner or an entrepreneur, that every single Canadian will be receiving value for their dollar, for their tax. I have committed thus far to end the carbon tax immediately upon becoming Prime Minister in Canada. I have also stated that I will rescind the capital gains increase in tax that was put in just months ago, because I think we need to ensure that we are competitive as a country and as an economy to spur innovation, to spur competitiveness. I have also committed to having a growth and prosperity agenda so that we have an exact action plan. We need to have short-term goals and long-term goals, and all of us across the country need to know what those are so we can continue to work towards them.
So tax is and modifying the tax system is one of your major planks. How do you think that differs from some of your competitors?
Well, some of them have not come forward with policy planks, so I can't really say, what their platforms are going to be. But the one thing that I can say is that they had 10 years, to fix the system, but they actually broke the system. And that's why, the Liberal Party is at 16% in the polls today. That's why we as a country, when you take a look at us internationally, do not have the level of respect. And that's why another issue grappling our country as a result of the last 10 years is the brain drain. There are a number of individuals, there is a number of families, there are a number of businesses that are all leaving Canada. We need to bring back pride in our country where people, instead of leaving, actually want to come here, and stay here to ensure that they build their businesses. We need to ensure that our tax system is reflective of what the global reality of tax structures in other parts of the world are. And unless we have a competitive tax structure, unless we have, competitive metrics, that is the only two methods in which people will actually want to come and flourish and have their businesses started and actually sustainable in Canada for the long term.
Donald Trump has threatened 25% tariffs against Canada. How are you going to deal with Donald Trump?
Well, I'm a businesswoman and he is a businessman. And the one thing I think that both of us know how to do is negotiate deals. I think during my career as a businesswoman, I have also met and dealt with many Donald Trumps of the world. And the one thing that I can and will do is to negotiate the best deal with Donald Trump to ensure that we as Canadians and that we as a country come out on top. I think it's incredibly important that we have someone who has the negotiation skills, who has the insight and the knowledge of dealing with a personality type like Donald Trump, having all of this bickering being done out in public. You have to always, when you go in to negotiate a deal, always do a very careful analysis of the type of individual that you're going to be negotiating with. And for anyone that does know me, I'm absolutely no nonsense. I don't let anything get by me. I've dealt with many Donald Trumps of the world, and I will ensure that we get the best deal for Canadians and for Canada. And at the same time, Brian, sorry, I also want to mention that we as a country also need to start developing long-term strategic relationships with other countries globally. I think the one lesson that this is teaching us as we get threatened with these tariffs is that you cannot put all of your eggs in one basket. We need to start having long-term trade relationships. We need to ensure that we start dealing with many of the other emerging economies globally and other countries where our manufacturers, and our entrepreneurs have the ability to connect with, others around the world other than the US. And if we diversify, then we as a country will never be beholden to anybody.
How do we do that? Pierre Trudeau 50 years ago talked about third option and significantly increasing our economic ties to Asia, Europe, etc. But it really hasn't happened. How do we achieve what your objective is?
I think that was, 50 years ago. When we fast forward, I think the world has changed. We've become much more globalized in nature. And I think that when you want to increase trade, you want to increase competitiveness, you want to ensure the success of Canadian workers and Canadian entrepreneurs, it starts off by having good relationships. In the last 10 years, and don't mind my language, but we have pissed off countries all over the world. And you're not going to have a starting point to start increasing trade or championing relationships or partnerships with other countries when so many of the other countries are all upset with Canada for one reason or the other. And for anyone, again, that does know me, I'm the type of individual who is very collaborative. I'm very cooperative, but I am also no nonsense. And I think if you have a good working relationship where you can start building partnerships, we as a country will be better off for it. So the first element of having this implemented will be to have a strong partnerships created through a diversification with other countries.
But one of the countries we've harmed our relationship with fairly dramatically over the past couple of years is India, which you're obviously very familiar with. What have we done wrong there, and how would you change it?
Well, I think that there's issues, with India on multiple different levels. And myself being from an Indian, Indian heritage, even though I was born and raised in Canada, I have insight into the many personalities, into their policies, into their politics. And I think having those three insights will only help our country, will only help Canada, will only help Canadians, so that we actually negotiate deals which are going to benefit the many, not only entrepreneurs and companies, but we have many pension funds in Canada that do business in India. So I think having that insight, that perspective, those relationships will only further and strengthen the relationship that Canada and India has.
We're chatting today with Dr. Ruby Dhalla, who's announced her candidacy for leadership of the Liberal Party. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back in just 2 minutes. We're going to talk about a couple different policy areas and see what she's got to say. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Dr. Ruby Dhalla is my guest tonight. She's announced her candidacy for the Liberal leadership. She's got a background in politics. She was elected 3 times as a member of Parliament, and she's spent the last, decade and a bit in business and in the hotel business and entertainment business, etc. Let's talk about a couple different policies, if we could. You've talked about tax and your strategy in regards to our tax policy. Housing has been one of the focuses of the federal government and the provincial government over the course of the last 2 years, since initially Justin Trudeau said it wasn't a priority of the federal government and then changed his mind. And the last budget really was almost all about housing. Housing has become unaffordable for a lot of young Canadians. What would you do, if anything, from a housing affordability, housing supply standpoint?
We're going to be sharing, our policy platform over the upcoming days and weeks, but I can tell you that the issue of unaffordability and housing in this country, in our country is going to be a main pillar of that policy platform, because I think living in a first world country, it is unjust to me that Canadians are struggling to put a roof over their head. We have young Canadians who have gone out to university, who have educated themselves and have gotten good jobs after their education, but still cannot put a roof over their head because the prices of housing are just so astronomically high depending upon where they want to live. So I think it's incredibly important that we address this particular issue, that we provide incentives, for new homeowners, but also, again, going back to what I was saying about reevaluating our whole tax regime. Right now, if you are an investor that owns a home and you sell that house, you actually have to pay a capital gains tax on the profit that you make. One of the areas that we need to explore, with some further study is, do we allow investors, to actually sell their homes without having to pay a capital gains tax for a portion of time, which would ultimately free up more inventory, create more supply, and then address the demand, which would subsequently reduce the housing prices in the country. So those are some innovative approaches that we need to actually take a look at.
So in the United States, if you enjoy a capital gain on a house or any kind of real estate, and you reinvest that money in something of equal or greater value, you don't pay a tax, and that is a tax structure that the Americans have to incentivize people to continue developing homes and developing real estate. And so I agree with you. Now, ultimately, the government still gets the tax, but it's delayed until it gets the tax. And so you don't forgive tax. It's just you delay tax and you provide incentives for people to grow their real estate investments. So something like that you think might make sense?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think we need to be very innovative and creative. And, I'm coming in from a perspective that the solutions that we've had traditionally, they're no longer working. People are mad in our country. People are upset. They're frustrated. And they're just getting tired of having to live paycheck to paycheck without having anything extra even left over, or the challenges they're facing of putting a roof over their head, or, grocery prices, which are just skyrocketed and doubled or tripled in some cases. Even cell phone bills. Why are we as Canadians paying some of the highest cell phone bills, in the world? It just does not make sense. And so whether it's in housing or food prices or ensuring even as entrepreneurs that we're competitive, we need to take a look at our entire sort of tax structure. We need to do an overhaul. But we need to have someone who has not been a lifelong politician. We need to have someone who has not been involved, in this particular leadership with actually creating, or advising advising on all of these policies. They've broken the system and now they want to fix it. That concept doesn't make sense. We need to have someone who's just really fearless and someone who is there, who's going to be able to make bold decisions, who's going to make tough decisions, but who is going to ensure that Canadians and Canada ultimately succeeds. We need to have those qualities in the next leader of the Liberal Party and Canada's next Prime Minister.
One of the criticisms of the Liberal government, the Trudeau government, has been its over-focus on climate change at the expense of economic development, particularly in regards to natural resources. And pipelines, for an example, both to the West Coast and to the East Coast, were stopped because of regulatory environmental reviews and things like that. Would you be supportive of more pipelines to either the East Coast or the West Coast?
We're going to be coming out with our policy platform in a few days and coming weeks, so I will be commenting, but I can tell you right now that, I will be ending the carbon tax. That will be one of my first initiatives on my first day on the job as Prime Minister of our country. And I also believe that we have to ensure, that we do provide protections available, for our environment. People do want to protect and save the environment, but like you said, we have to balance that, with the economic cost to our country. And right now, we as a nation need to start doing much better to compete, from an economic perspective, not only within Canada, but also globally as well. And I commit, to ensuring that Canadians and, that we all together as a country are competitive, both domestically and internationally.
One of the complaints Donald Trump has about Canada is that we haven't been meeting our commitments to NATO of spending 2% of GDP on national defense. What would you do? Would you spend 2% of our GDP on national defense?
Again, I'm going to be coming out with my policy platform, so we'll come back on your show and get more into, detail on some of these. But I do believe that it's important to protect our country, to protect our nation, to ensure that we have adequate defense spending, to ensure that they have all of the resources that they do need. So, but we will be coming out in a few days, in the coming weeks on our policy platform.
So if you were on the debate stage with Pierre Poilievre, what would you say?
You're a lifelong politician, and I've actually had insight into, running a business, into being a healthcare provider, knowing firsthand of the healthcare crisis that our country is facing, and also having, insight into being able to connect with average Canadians, because I was born and raised in Winnipeg, did a lot of work out in Western Canada, and I think it's important to have someone who is from the grassroots in our country to be able to provide leadership. I'm not a lifelong politician. I'm coming in with a lot of background, a lot of business acumen, and also the ability to negotiate deals. And I also think, it being 2025, our country, it is time to have a woman prime minister.
What about on the debate stage with Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland? How are you going to rebut their experiences?
You had 10 years to do the job, and what happened? You broke the system, and why do you want to fix it now?
So Mark Carney, is running as an outsider as well. Has not been in Parliament, hasn't been part of the Liberal government or the Liberal cabinet. He's got, it would appear from his resume, very good experience, maybe not running businesses, but certainly from an economic standpoint. How do you think your experience compares to his?
I think that, he has great experience given what he's done, and he would be a great minister of finance. He has not run in any election previous to this, and I think that if I was prime minister, I would take a look and consider if I could have him as my minister of finance. But once again, he's never run an election, and he has been affiliated with the Trudeau government. He was the one that advised on many of the policies, including the carbon tax, and one is left scratching their head of why he has said that he wants to end the carbon tax, because he's the one that designed, to help develop it.
What about Chrystia Freeland? What would you say about her experience?
She walked out on 40 million Canadians when she left hours before she was delivering the fall economic statement. How can Canadians trust you to not walk out on them again?
Whoa, that's pretty hard hitting.
It's a fact.
So you are going to be running as an outsider. you're going to be running as someone who's got business experience as well as political experience, but yet the Canadians know you. You've been sort of absent from the public sphere for the last decade or so. How are you going to reintroduce yourself to Canadians?
I've still dedicated my life, to public service, even though I was focused on the private sector. And there are, a number of Canadians who've reached out from all across Canada. People just really, really want change. And when you talk about, Brian, how am I going to introduce myself? People are so mad and angry and frustrated. They want a leader who is fearless, who is going to be bold. And that is why they want to have someone who has the experience as a self-made businesswoman, someone who's a healthcare provider, someone who also has legislative experience, who's been tried and trusted in, 3 election campaigns. They want to have someone at the helm who is going to be fearless in making the decisions that our country requires. Someone who understands what the issues are, someone who connects with average Canadians, and someone who is not there looking for a job, but is actually there to implement, impact, and affect change, not only for us as Canadians at home, but also for our country internationally. And I think that given that, my whole campaign is being based on the premise that Canada's comeback starts now. We are and we will have tremendous momentum across this country to ensure that, we will have a victory at the end.
Dr. Ruby Dhalla, good luck and thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate it.
Is there a website that people should go to if they want to find out more about you and potentially support you in the leadership campaign?
Yes, I've said Canada's comeback starts now, and that's one of our main mottos. So we encourage everyone to get involved. This is really about making history. And I think that it is very important for everyone to have their voices heard. We have today, Monday, 27th, until 5 o'clock for people to sign up. So please get signed up. You can visit our website at www.ruby.forpm. So ruby4pm.com.
And you enticed me by saying you might announce something today that was new. Is there something new you want to announce?
Yes, I actually wanted to announce you're the first person that is hearing about this, you and your listeners. I have just been approved by the Liberal Party to run as leader for the Liberal Party and for Canada's next Prime Minister. We just received a letter minutes before I was joining your program.
Congratulations and good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We're going to take a break, and I'm going to come back with a few comments of my own on this Liberal leadership campaign, because I do think it is an incredible opportunity for the party to renew itself and for Canadians to really think about what we need in the future, particularly given the changed circumstances of the threatened tariffs from Donald Trump and how he's going to change North America, the world, potentially. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Thank you, Dr. Ruby Dhalla.
Thank you.